Well, this has been a rather exciting endeavor on my part, but I'm here with the man himself. Frank, would you like to introduce yourself and to let everyone know what you do?
The man himself. I don't know about
Yes.
that. Hey guys, I'm Frank Azor. I'm the Chief Solutions Architect for Gaming Solutions over at AMD.
And would you like to kind of go a little bit into your role and, because you were originally, correct me if I'm wrong, but you were previously working at Alienware. So how does your role here compare to that? And what do you find like the frustration levels are like compared to there? And yeah, just kind of give us a little bit of insight.
Sure. Yeah, so longtime Alienware guy. Started with Alienware back in 1998. It was really my first job in tech. And then I was with Alienware and Dell, running the Alienware business, the global gaming business for Dell, including our G series business back then, and the XPS business and product line up until almost 2 years ago now, until July of 2019. And did that for what, 21 years, I think, if I did the math correctly. And came over to AMD in July of 2019. I saw what AMD was working on. Try and remember July of 2019. They had just launched RDNA 1 and the
Mm.
Ryzen 3000 series Matisse processors. And I got really excited at the roadmap, really excited with the leadership team at AMD. And I wanted to try something new and different. I've been doing OEM solutions, gaming laptops and desktops for an OEM, whether it be Alienware or Dell, for over 2 decades. And moving upstream and onto the component side of the business was just something that was very interesting to me. It was very curious to me how things worked here. And I always had a lot of big ideas that really couldn't have been executed by a OEM at the OEM level because they were, very hardware or driver based type of ideas that really required influence in at the CPU and the GPU level in order for them to be able to materialize. So once I was kind of like done with all the ideas I had, not entirely, but the big ideas I had for desktops and laptops and every other form factor in between, I wanted to try and put some of these other ideas that I've been kind of collecting over the years into practice. And AMD is just a great opportunity to be able to do that as the only company right now that has high performance CPUs and high performance GPUs. It was a very unique opportunity for me to try and help make some of these ideas possible and introduce them to the market.
Yeah, I mean, I think to be honest, AMD's leadership has been really good. I mean, Lisa herself is I think it's fair to say that she basically kind of just turned the company around. It's like a U-turn. I was just looking at the stock prices and it's like, from $2, $3, and suddenly it's just like almost vertical at some point, how the stock with obviously, the first Zen architecture. But let's kind of get to the hard questions. Let's start out with one of the harder ones. So obviously, when you guys were first announcing the RX 6000 series, the Ryzen 5000 series, there was quite a lot mentioned about smart access memory SAM. And now, obviously, that your competitors have rolled it out, um, it's quite interesting because percentage wise, anyway, I'm noticing that AMD's hardware does a little bit better. And so I guess, I guess it was a cheesy pun, but what is your secret of the Radeon boost there? Can you kind of explain what smart access memory is, and like, is it because you kind of had that ground up design idea where you're in so much control of the ecosystem, like on the CPU, the motherboard, and the GPU?
Yeah, you got it, Paul. The benefit of having our high performance CPUs and our high performance graphics all within the same company where the teams, the left hand and the right hand, can just talk to one another and interface, and there's no filtering. It's all just raw conversation. You're seeing the benefit of that directly in smart access memory. This is one of the things that has me so excited about our potential because it's SmartShift was kind of the first, um, I would say, modern product of that unique company structure that we have, where we have both of those IPs in the same under the same company umbrella, and then
Hmm.
smart access memory comes out, and then our competitor responds with their solution, and you can clearly see that our strategy is working. That collaboration, having the two technologies under the same umbrella, there's the byproduct of, there's the result of it right there. And it's tangible benefit for everybody, for us, and especially for our customers. It's basically free. You have to have technology that supports it, of course, but typically to get the kind of performance uplift that we're getting out of smart access memory, which ranges between 5, in some cases as high as 17 and higher % uplift just by turning it on, you'd usually have to move up a bin or two in a GPU or a CPU to kind of get that type of benefit. That could
Even
cost
hefty
you hundreds of
overclocking.
dollars.
Even hefty overclocking probably wouldn't get you that, to be
Correct.
honest.
Correct. And that would cost you hundreds of dollars. And we're giving it to you for free, right? So yeah, how did we do it? We're just unique in the position that we're in. This is A plus A plus A, AMD CPU, AMD GPU, AMD software working together, and this is the benefit of it. So think about it. We've only really been doing this outside of integrating the graphics into the CPU to make the APU, which AMD started doing back when it acquired ATI. Beyond that, we've really only been doing this for the PC space since Smart Access Memory and now Smart Shift and Smart Access Memory. So, and this is the result. Imagine what we can do over the next few years. That's why I'm just so excited, and the potential that we have is enormous.
I think one of the major differences between AMD, and I think your competitors are slightly moving in this direction as well, but it's hard to deny that AMD really kind of dragged this into the forefront, was the openness of your ecosystem, particularly around software, like, for example, GPUOpen and so on. So I was just wondering, how do you guys kind of feel about this internally, and what's been the conversation, with developers, and how is that kind of conversation evolved over the past few years?
Well, I didn't really, to be very honest, appreciate the value proposition of GPUOpen and the culture that AMD has around using standards-based technologies and APIs and giving these technologies and APIs out to the community through GPUOpen, making them accessible to the entire industry, until I came here and understood how hard it is to do that. When you look at our technologies that are made available through GPUOpen, like FidelityFX, like CAS, just go down the list of FidelityFX features that we have, and there's over 8 features being used by almost 40 games out there that are using these features. FreeSync is another one, right? That we culturally we make it available out there with very low friction for free, and as a result, we have, I think, about 1,500 roughly, give or take, on displays that are supporting FreeSync.
I have to say, it's amazing for 4K TVs as well. FreeSync, it's just so effortless, and it's so. I know, it's actually quite transformative when you are playing on like a big screen, like a 50 or 60-inch screen, and you just like plonk, in goes the HDMI 2.1 cable, variable rate refresh, 120 hertz, and obviously that's benefited consoles as well a lot. FreeSync.
Exactly. But making that possible, it's not easy. Like, to make things simple, it's very, very hard to do that. To make things frictionless, to make them open to, these things are really difficult to do. You have to take input from multiple parties. You have to negotiate that input. You have to account for all the places you want this thing to be, compatible with, and where you want it to go off and proliferate. It's a lot easier to make something proprietary. A lot easier, because you just do what you're going to do, and everyone either gets on the train or doesn't jump on the train with you, kind of thing, right? So that the culture we have here to make these things open for the betterment of the industry, so that we can get better visuals, we can get a better computing experience as a result of this initiative, and as a result of these technologies being open and standards based. It's a huge effort. It's a huge sacrifice, but it's how we move the industry forward, not just how we move the company forward. That mindset, the mentality around that, is a mentality that I fully adopt and I fully support. When I think of the gaming industry 20 years ago, when we first got involved in it, when I think about the value proposition of Alienware back then, it was a foreign concept. No one was really doing it, except, I think, for Falcon Northwest and us. This niche idea is what everyone would call it, of a gaming computer. And the reason we did it is because it was so difficult to build a gaming computer back then that you basically had to be like an IT professional to be able to figure it out. You had DOS, you had Windows, 16-bit, 32-bit operating systems. We didn't even
Yeah,
really
I
have the
remember
internet.
that.
We didn't really have the internet back then. You used to, connect to the internet via a modem, and that was fun, right? You had Winsock. Remember Winsock? Remember
Oh
that
God,
thing?
don't! You're giving me PTSD. Stop it.
But the industry came together and, in a lot of ways, made games easier, patching of games easier with digital distribution platforms. Like, I think Steam was one of the pioneers in that, and look how successful that has been, and how many other similar solutions we have now that are making game patching and maintenance and management easier. Alienware had a big role in that too, and helping to bring a lot of new technologies and flair and energy and attention to the PC gaming space with our radical designs and things. But all these different pieces came together. The graphics card companies, whether it be 3DFX or ATI or NVIDIA, we all did things to make the industry simpler, to add more value to it, and to get us where we are today, which is the industry is enormous, right? I mean, the 2.4 billion people playing games on different devices out there,
It's
from PC,
crazy.
console to smartphone and cloud and the whole works. That's just enormous. And the way I look at it and the way AMD looks at it is the most important priority we can have is to continue to grow the entire market and the entire industry. And then within that, we have to be competitive to make sure that we're going to succeed and earn our fair share of that growing market. We think that's in the best interest of everyone, the gamers, the game developers, the hardware companies, everybody that's involved. So it's hard to do that. And open standards are our strategy for how we're going to go about doing it. It's been working. There's several proof cases like FreeSync that it does work, but it's really challenging to do it. And that's why it takes us a little bit longer sometimes to come out with new features, because of those challenges.
I think there's also a really big thing to say because you guys obviously are powering with RDNA or variants, custom variants on the consoles as well. And I realize you can't break NDAs, which is fine. But one of the things I'm hearing from a couple of games developers is just that because, for example, the Xbox, the PlayStation are using variants of RDNA, it makes it a lot easier for them to kind of optimize around the Radeon ecosystem for PC because obviously if it's RDNA, you still have that. And I think games, for example, like Resident Evil 8 Village, Godfall, there must be a lot of optimization there. So are you hearing that from developers that, it's kind of empowering them? And I think it's going to be very interesting to see what kind of position AMD will be in, let's say, 2-3 years' time when you've got new architectures out and to see how all of this is going to impact things. Now you guys are really competing heavily in high performance graphics.
Absolutely. It's a key benefit of the relationship we have with the PC market and the console market and the cross leverage that we have across the RDNA architecture. Again, talk about complexity, right? If we were just building an architecture only for PC or only for console, honestly, it'd probably be easier because you're building to a narrower use case with much less complexity. But the benefit of being able to build to both, take the requirements and the success factors from both of those segments of the market, incorporate them into an architecture, and then be able to leverage them as much as is allowable and as possible reasonably. That's harder, but the benefit is exactly what you just said, Paul. When games are coming out and game developers are developing their games, look, it's not anything that's, should be surprising to anybody. It just makes perfect sense. If you get your game to work on an RDNA-based console, you've designed it to work on that hardware platform. Now, there's software variables, there's driver variables, firmware, all those types of things, right? But
Mhm.
you've at least gotten a big chunk of the journey done by getting it to work on the hardware architecture. Now you bring that title over to the PC, and that chunk of work is transferable. A lot of those problems have already been solved for you, and you start with a platform that needs tweaks and drivers and optimizations and debugging versus having to start from ground zero to figure out how you're going to get this thing to light up. And so we do see that benefit. The entire industry sees that benefit. Games are easier to port over because of that. That reduces the burden on ISVs and game developers. And what that does is it gives us these ports quicker, and it gives them better efficiency and performance typically on an all AMD platform, because they've been just so tweaked and optimized for those consoles that we reap those benefits as well.
And speaking of actually optimization, you guys have just released a new driver revision. Well, we're recording this on the day it's happening, but it's not going to be uploaded for a few days. So just, it depends on your perspective. People watching this are going to be in a time warp. But you've just released 21.4.1, which have a plethora of new advancements in them. AMD Link is really cool. That's 4.0 if memory serves. They obviously got the VRS technology as well. So if you just kind of want to go over a few of the things you find are highlights, and then just kind of sell your own product.
Well, I try not to be too self-serving sometimes and be a pitch man when we do these interviews, because then people tune out.
Do it.
So I'll try and keep it brief. Look, it's a new software update to the Radeon driver package, and a couple kind of key points. AMD Link, if you're not familiar with it, it's something that's been around for a while, where we allow you to basically turn your AMD Radeon-based system into kind of like a game server. So similarly to how you would connect to a cloud server, a server in the cloud, to play games or run apps, you can do that with your Radeon-based PC. So imagine you got a Chromebook in your hand and you're 1,000 miles away for whatever reason, back when we get to traveling again as a world. And you have some spare time and you want to fire up, Godfall and play it. You're not going to have an easy time doing that on a Chromebook or on an integrated graphics Windows-based PC, much less on a smartphone or a tablet. AMD Link allows you to do all of that. So you can basically pull up a browser, go access your remote PC, and play these games at really low latency, really low bandwidth as well, because we encode it really tight. So it's very efficient over that broadcast, over the internet, to stream it. And we've had smartphone and iPad and tablet, I should say, capabilities now, and even TV, smart app TVs, smart TVs for a while. But we didn't have Windows to Windows streaming. So with the new version, you can actually do Windows to Windows streaming in home or out of home of your games and your content. So think of it as your own little personal cloud that you're able to access at any point, anywhere around the world. We've also improved the user interface. So we've been taking a lot of feedback from the community. We spend probably too much time on Reddit, honestly, filtering through what are some of the productive comments that we can take and apply to how we improve the software user interface. And we've put a bunch of new improvements in there. One of the things people have been asking us for is they wanted a more streamlined installer, or install option, I should say, like a minimal install, like a driver-only installation. They didn't necessarily want all the software capabilities that the Radeon software has. So we've offered that option now too with the new installer. If you want something lighter, you have the option to do that. You don't have to take the full software package. Another one that I'm really excited about, because it fits into the A+A+A strategy, is we've brought in some of the CPU performance metrics into the Radeon software. So you can look at your CPU utilization, you can look at your clock speeds, you can look at your temperatures, your voltage, your power consumption, all these different settings for your CPU, much like we've offered you on the GPU now for a while. And we're starting to build you kind of like one universal software interface for your entire AMD system. And you'll find that now in the new version. We've also improved the streaming capabilities of the software. So, you have one-click streaming options now, and the user interface has been enhanced as well. So we're not trying to go after like OBS or any of those, high-end performance kind of streaming solutions.
Relieved to hear it.
What's that?
I said, I'm sure they're relieved to hear it.
Yeah, we're not at all trying to do. This is for someone who wants to send a stream to a friend, who doesn't want to have to learn how to use one of these other third-party solutions. It's a free tool built in, one-click, stream, done. It's pretty simple. That's what it's intended to be, is an amateur kind of entry-level solution for you if you're not a hardcore content creator and streamer. And then we've implemented some color deficiency correction. So we got some feedback around folks that have some vision deficiencies or challenges, and they wanted some color correction type of tools. So we built all those into the game, into the software. And then we have also built in AV1 support into the software. So new codec that some of these streaming sites are going to be using and evolving to in the future. It now is supported with the Radeon 6000 series cards with the new software build. And we have something called Crash Defender, which is our way of bringing a little bit more reliability and stability into the software, so that if you do have a blue screen or an issue, instead of kind of everything being catastrophic, there's a stay alive, as we call it, preservation feature, where you can kind of keep the machine operating almost in like a safe mode to an extent, the graphics driver in a safe mode. So you can kind of recover your things, close your things out, and then officially do a restart to get back to normal. Those are the key features of the software.
I think honestly, I mean, as someone who actually tweaks his hardware quite a bit and tries to, kind of maximize it, I've been messing around a lot with the 6800 XT. And yeah, like I'm getting it to like 2600 megahertz, trying to undervolt it. And sometimes, you know, maybe just a little bit optimistic with the clocks it can go to, because you probably heard of the more power tool as well, where you can adjust power limits. But I'm trying to kind of figure out for future content. And yeah, it's like, despite the fact that I'm trying to make it crash, to be honest, at times, because you're trying to figure out like what is going to happen, I have to say that it does recover quite well in most 3D applications. It'll stall obviously, and the game just kind of dies, but in general, it works pretty well in actual stability. So I think, from my perspective, I think AMD Radeon drivers have come along a huge amount, and I think the GUI and usability is really good now. Just even the performance metrics like the overlay. Um, I generally do use MSI Afterburner quite a bit because, to be honest, it's just habit. But it's really nice to be able to, kind of get all of the junction temperatures and everything else in just kind of one thing. So I do think you guys have done a really good job over the past few years, especially.
Thank you for that feedback, Paul. We're having to rebuild our reputation with our drivers. Everybody goes through some dark periods with drivers. Ours have been a little bit more recent, so there's been a huge focus in ensuring that we're going to be quality centric first, stability centric first, and then new features and things would follow. With the launch of the RDNA 2 driver, we got a really strong market reception of it. Very, very few issues out there. The issues that were reported, we've been very responsive to them. Not every one has been resolved. There's always a Pareto of issues that we're prioritizing, but we're chugging away and resolving them very, very quickly. And we had very few when the driver first came out and the hardware first came out. So to hear someone like you who's so intimately involved with our hardware and our drivers and uses them inside and out, to feel that and to recognize it means the world to us. So thank you for the recognition, and hopefully our customers are seeing the same thing. We've also implemented a bug reporting tool. I don't know if you've seen that, but
no, I haven't.
Yeah, there's a bug reporting tool integrated into the software. I think it's in the upper right-hand corner. Yeah, right next to the question mark, there's a little, in the interface, there's something called Launch Bug Report. So that's a way. In the past, people would report issues to us through our website, our support page, or through Reddit, or on Twitter, and we'd kind of sift through social media, and we still do that. But we figured there's like a two-step process there. There's a disconnection between us and the customer. Let's just make it easier for folks to directly communicate the bugs that they're experiencing to us, and have the option to send us some telemetry of their system if they want, to help us diagnose it better. And that's what we've implemented now. So we're getting reports directly. They're all being parsed and analyzed, and we're finding the common recurring issues. We're replicating them, and we're queuing up solutions to those issues. Again, our commitment to quality, to rebuilding the reputation of our drivers and our brand it's solid. And we're doing everything we can think of to try and get there. And I'm glad you're seeing the benefit of that.
I mean, to be honest, when the 5700 and 5700 XT first launched, a lot of people were kind of complaining about the black screen issues, and I was sent one, by you guys, and I tried to make it crash on multiple systems. Like, Dude, I tried. Like, I was doing everything. I felt like, at one point I was feeling like hitting it with a hammer. I was like, okay, let me use like the crappiest power supply I've got. Let me try an Intel system. I tried it on my Haswell system as well, rather than my 10th gen. I tried it on like two different AMD different boards, and I just couldn't get it to crash. But obviously, some people were. And this is the issue, I think, with PC gaming. And obviously, as you said, having a robust crash the reporting tool was really important. But one thing I did notice in your slide, actually, the driver update kind of spiel that I got from you guys, not in a negative way, but it was kind of interesting, is you said that since the launch of, the first generation of RDNA, with, I think it was the 5700 XT, correct me if I'm wrong, but Wolfenstein has got that's Youngblood, a 23% performance boost, which to be honest, is quite tangible. Again, that's like going from a 5700 to a 5700 XT, or an imaginary
Even more than that,
5800 X.
maybe.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's maybe even like going from like an imaginary 5800 XT. And I suppose one of the things that I would like to ask you guys, how do you kind of deal? How to say it? Because obviously, even Polaris now is getting features like, Radeon image sharpening or Radeon boost or whatever. And that is really good for people who kind of invest, because most folks, as you know, they don't buy a card and then it's like, I mean, I'm a YouTuber, so I'm quite privileged. I get hardware sent to me or whatever. But a lot of people are keeping their cards. They've still got a GTX 1080, or they've still got like a Vega 56 or whatever. So how do you guys kind of reconcile that internally, and what's your kind of strategy around that?
So our strategy is absolutely to keep investing in the AMD customer journey. And that's one of the attributes of it, is giving our customers that are in that journey continuous value for being a part of it. If you think about, what we did, I mean, this is just cultural at AMD, right? So think about when we launched the Ryzen 5000 series processors. There was a lot of feedback around compatibility with previous generation chipsets. And we initially said no, and we got a lot of strong feedback about that. And we went back and we figured it out. And yeah, we made it compatible with, what was it, the 400 series chipsets, I think.
Four, yeah.
When we launched Smart Access Memory, we got a lot of feedback that folks wanted to see it work with previous generation CPUs, not just the Ryzen 5000 series. So we went back and we brought up qualification, validation efforts. We put resources behind it. And it supports Ryzen 3000 series processors now too. We announced that when we introduced the 6700 XT graphics card. Scott Herkelman announced that. That's the culture that we have at AMD. There's a journey, and we want our customers to understand that we're with them in that journey. When it comes to game performance on drivers, this isn't actually something that's brand new. Some people refer to it as a fine wine strategy that you were
Exactly.
referencing, where the driver on day one versus the driver 6 months or a year later on the same exact hardware can look drastically different on some games, because we don't just launch driver day one. We continuously invest in that game portfolio and in that hardware for years. We're looking backwards and saying, how do we make it better? How do we make it better? How do we make it better? The other thing is that games do get more demanding. Sometimes they shift from DX9 to 10, 10 to 11. Like, you see those things happen as well. We want our customers to be able to enjoy their hardware when they're part of the value proposition of being an AMD customer. If you think about it, probably not like, the best business decision if you think about it, right? And
No, I mean,
some of our competitors
sorry to
have
interject,
a
but
different approach.
I was just saying, I was testing the 480 here as part of a video. Sorry to interrupt, but I have to say this. It's amazing still what the RX 480 can do. I mean, this is not me being like PR-y. It's honestly like, okay, if you go in thinking it's going to be a 4K card, obviously that's not realistic. But 1080p or 1440p with like settings down, I was playing like Horizon Zero Dawn, decent settings at like 50-ish frames a second. And that is damn impressive. I think anyway.
Thank you. I agree. And what people should understand about us is, when we launch a new graphics card and we show you the benchmarks and you guys review them and you come out with all the benchmarks and everything, that is by and large the worst performance that you're going to see out of that graphics card. Just think about that. Think about how close we are to the competition, how the benchmarks line up. And you're looking at the worst performance you're going to see over the life cycle of that graphics card. There's some exceptions. Sometimes you come out with a new driver and performance drops 1% or something like that within a game, but that's a very minor exception. Fast forward 6 months, a year, 2 years, you may see 5%, 10%, who knows? Because we don't exactly know. It's not like we're holding back performance when we launch these things. It's just in time, if you invest in the game and in the hardware, you uncover more opportunities. You work with the ISV to tweak more things, to optimize more things, to build more efficiency into it. And with time comes the benefit because we're committed to it. If we didn't engage post driver release, if we just said, here's a performance, now we're moving on to the next graphics card and all our resources are focusing on the next graphics card, we're not going to go back and improve any of the install base, it would be a very different experience. But this is like the most underappreciated, under-recognized kind of feature, I think, or
definitely
value of being in the AMD ecosystem is this culture of kind of backwards improvement and compatibility and open standards that we just continue to invest enormously into.
I mean, again, this is not a scripted thing, but I remember because recently there was a guy called Philip, I can't remember his second name, but he was testing like ray tracing performance and the way that you guys, I think, changed the way that RT was being handled on the GPU. I think it became like Wave 32 rather than 64. And I tested it, and yes, there's like a 5-ish% improvement on that, and that's just since launch with games that have already been, released. These are not future games. These are like games now, and it was literally just a driver update. I can't remember what the driver revisions were because my brain is like not good at remembering the decimals, but it was like one version improved, sorry, one version incremented, and the performance like 3 to 5%, which is decent, considering it's no effort.
Free performance. It's like smart access memory. It's just free performance uplift. Right? I mean, we just keep doing as much of this as we possibly can. We're trying to make graphics, we're trying to make the experience much more efficient. When you look at the efficiency that went into the RDNA 2 architecture, we spent a lot of time talking about that. It's remarkably efficient. You take smart access memory, which is just an efficient improvement in performance. Smart shift efficiency, these driver updates, there is efficiency. Throwing raw horsepower at a problem is a tactic, and we have to do some of that too. But we're balancing more and more throwing raw horsepower with it, with just getting smarter around how we deliver performance. And these are all these different things we're talking about here make up the portfolio of the RDNA 2 architecture, but the overall experience of computing on AMD.
So, switching topics, obviously you guys have made a lot of inroads when it comes to mobile. I think it's fair to say that you didn't really have much like servers, you kind of had a very small server presence, let's say 5 years ago. And obviously it was very similar to mobile, but things have happened a lot, changed a lot with Renoir. And now you've obviously got Cezanne, which is Zen 3 based, very impressive PPW performance per watt, decent, even decent-ish integrated graphics. So I suppose what I want to ask is, what's the conversation been like with OEMs? And how has this changed? Because, I just remember when the 300 series boards got released, back obviously with the first generation of Zen, people were a little tentative, like, Asus, whomever, they didn't come out and say it to me exactly, but you could see that there was some that, how well is this going to compete? But it became really obvious that, oh, wow, Zen is really good. And everyone was rushing out, kind of throwing out boards, and you saw VRM solutions increase. And so I just wanted to know, what did you think of like the way that OEMs have been kind of treating you, the presence in the market, customers, and so on, because of these impressive chips for mobile?
Well, it's kind of hard to believe, but Zen 1 was really good. Zen 2 was great, and Zen 3 was amazing. Is amazing. Zen 2 was introduced almost 2 years ago, not even 2 years ago now. This has all happened very quickly, and we've had an enormous amount of success with OEMs. I think we've announced in the past well over 100 designs that we had for the Ryzen 4000 series, and that continues to grow over time. But all these things have happened very quickly. I mean, we went from AMD kind of being your entry-level solution when it came to notebooks and desktops to, in a very short amount of time, just 2 years ago, it's suddenly becoming your high performance top end solution. And in a lot of ways, I think the market wasn't ready for that. And OEMs, the DIY market can react to that very quickly. Suddenly, AMD has the better product. The DIY builds just immediately start migrating over to that. As you're considering buying a new or building your new rig, you now have the front runner, the choice that you want to go after. As an OEM, and I was an OEM for a long time, it's not that transactional. You have to plan your roadmap years in advance. And the development of one of these solutions, like a notebook or a desktop, I mean, some of our more complex products in my history took us 2 years to develop. Just think about that. So we had to lock decisions and designs 2 years in advance, and we wouldn't see the production run of that product until 2 years later. And if you start changing decisions midway, especially the entire platform, it kind of resets the entire schedule. So your choices are, do I continue launching something that isn't the best in the market, but it's midway through development and I at least have something in market, even if it's not going to be the best of the best? Or do I make a change and reset everything and have N-1 technology, for example, in market? What's the worst of that situation? So again, go back to the realization of AMD's leadership in CPU came 2 years ago, and we're really starting to see a lot of new products coming out that are really exciting. Like this year, there's a bunch of systems out there that are featuring 3080 and 3070 graphics, which you didn't see last year. There's a lot of feedback about that, but that's now been corrected. And then on graphics, we're on a similar journey. Graphics is a little bit of a later journey than Ryzen. RDNA 2 is kind of like what I say. It's kind of like our Zen 2 moment. It's really, really good. It's very competitive. It's very efficient. And we're seeing an enormous amount of success because of that, and a lot of other reasons too. I mean, obviously the market is phenomenal as well and challenging at the same time. But as part of all of that, you're not going to succeed with OEMs, especially if you're not just raw horsepower, performant. You have to also be efficient, because battery life, especially in notebooks, it's critical. You have different regions around the world where power consumption plays an even larger role in the purchase of technology. You have governments, you have corporations that are very focused on power efficiency as well. And beyond that, it's about just engineering excellence too. There's something about being able to build a product and engineer a product that is both extremely performant but also very efficient. It's just a higher level of sophistication, of engineering prowess and capability. And I think we have the best engineers at AMD. So, I mean, it's only right that we're able to produce something as remarkable as Zen 3 and as an RDNA 2 that are performing as well as they are and are also as efficient as they are. And thankfully, the market's been rewarding us because of that.
I suppose this actually brings me to my next question. So, um, obviously, Lisa Hasu herself has said that when it comes to product roadmaps, you're making bets 3 to 5 years in advance. So I suppose what I want to know is, obviously you can't leak your roadmap, but I'm not expecting that type of information.
I can. It'll just be the last time we're able to talk to one another.
Yeah, it'll probably be like you getting hunted down and me getting hunted down. I'm getting enough trouble with my leaks already. Let's not keep going. That's both into trouble. So yeah, let's say that you look at the roadmap of kind of making these bets from Zen 1, Zen 2, Zen 3, and whatever kind of interim architectures like APUs, GPUs. So I just wanted to know, how do you guys kind of think of this in terms of a holistic kind of design and language? Like, how do the engineers internally speak to one another? And can you kind of give us, for people who are less technically inclined, maybe a basic understanding of kind of the bring up? Because there is this kind of thought or misconception that you can kind of, oh, this feature, or this is, we're just going to add, I don't know, just for example, this feature, this massive feature 5 minutes before it's released. And obviously that's not realistic. You don't just say, okay, we're going to add, hardware-based ray tracing 5 minutes before launch, go. So I just kind of wanted to, your opinion on that.
Yeah, what's interesting is, and I'm still learning this because I'll tell you, coming from the OEM side of the world and then moving into I guess, the component technology side of the world, the silicon side of the world, they're drastically different. Very, very different. And I'm not trying to say any one's more hard or harder than the other necessarily or anything of that nature, but all that aside, they're just very, very different. So I'm only like less than 2 years into learning this. So I'm not the expert on this ball, but I'll tell you what some of the stuff that I've learned. I talked about my most complex product in my previous life taking about 2 years to develop. And it took about a year to plan. So you plan for a year, and in that planning phase, you're getting customer insights, you're coming up with a hypothesis for what you think you should go do, you're testing a hypothesis with research, you're putting business cases together to justify it, understanding what the investment's going to be, the schedule, you're figuring out your resources, where you're going to get them from, you have to hire people or not. And then once you're ready to go and you're like, let's go, we're going to move into development. Again, this is the most complex product I worked on. It was about 2 years of execution. Here, it's about like you referenced Lisa say, it's like no less than 3
Yeah,
years
3 years is like Zen plus.
Yeah, and then it's like the new architecture stuff is like 5 years. And what you have to try and understand is every day you add to trying to predict the future is less and less clear. Like I can tell you tomorrow it's probably going to rain here in South Florida because it's kind of rainy today and there's kind of a cold front, up north or whatever. But if you ask me what the weather's going to be like a year from now, maybe I can kind of look at an almanac and kind of things and give you some type of a sense. But ask me 5 years from now, how much, I mean, it's really, really challenging. So that's what makes it amazing how smart some of our people here are and how good and capable they are in product planning these things and defining the IPs and the technologies. But nobody gets it all right. So you hedge some things here. You kind of you have to just make some bets, and it's extremely challenging. Again, I had to make those bets 2 and 3 years in advance in my old role, and now I'm watching people make those bets 3 to 5 years in advance, and it's remarkable to see it happen and how much intelligence goes into it, and knowledge and instinct and experience. And I think it's a hell of an experience to watch it all happen. And I get to spectate it because I'm not a silicon designer or an engineer or a CPU product manager or anything. But we certainly interface with them because as we're defining these AAA technologies, we're starting to find those bonds in the roadmap that make the CPU, the GPU, and the software work better together. And there's some things you do in the short term, some things in the medium term, and some things you could do in the long term. So we're only 2 years, excuse me, we're only less than 2 years into it. And we have huge accomplishments like Smart Shift, Smart Access Memory, and more coming. Just imagine where we'll be in 3 to 5 years as more of these things have been co-planned with one another. And you're going to see the roadmap continuously grow. Like you've seen the CPU roadmap grow and the GPU roadmap grow, you're going to see these AAA technologies also grow over time because we've had the ability to start participating in that 3 to 5 year roadmap planning process. So that's all I can pretty much say. The other thing I'll add, a lot of people ask me what's going to happen in the future. Well, look, the past is a generally pretty good indicator of the future. So if you look at, it's not 100%, but if you look at what we've done in the past and when we've done it, we're always trying to do it as fast as, if not faster, than we've done in the past. And we're going to keep working our behinds off to continue to execute and continue to win in the market. We still have a long way to go. We've really only been winning with leadership CPUs, and now, on par with graphics and starting to get to a position, hopefully, where we best for a couple of years. So we want to do that for a decade. We want to do that for 2 decades. So there's still a lot of work ahead of us.
Yeah, so I guess one of the big things that AMD did, and a really big push was Mantle. And I know that Mantle didn't have a long shelf life, so to speak, but some people have told me off the record, including let's just say a Microsoft employee. I can't say too much because obviously I don't want to have them like come at me with a chainsaw. But I've had a Microsoft employee as well as obviously Kronos Group themselves largely have told us that Mantle was a direct push for Vulkan. So I suppose what I'm trying to say is that we've seen now the kickstart of low-level APIs, and obviously that's been a really good thing for the industry. But from this, so much is starting to happen. We're starting to really see these low-level APIs being used, like hardware-based ray tracing, variable rate shading, mesh shaders, and Microsoft themselves is like the build event where they're going to be kind of detailing things like direct storage. So I'm just wondering, like, how does AMD kind of think that this is going to evolve in terms of like the needs for gamers? And I suppose if you could kind of give a little bit of insight into how you feel that you can empower developers as well as gamers.
Look, I think there's a fundamental difference in philosophy between us and our competition as to how we approach the market from a graphics and the graphics API perspective. We're trying to, like I referenced earlier, enable the industry with new technologies, and we have multiple proof points that demonstrate that. FreeSync, FidelityFX, I mean, we keep going down the list. And, the history of Mantle, I'll tell you, Mantle lives on in different forms. I can't confirm or deny what those different forms are, but it lives on in many different forms. Our goal is to continue to push the industry forward and to earn our place in it with customers' loyalty and their business and their favorability for our products and our brand. We are going to continue to try to limit proprietary things as much as we possibly can, because that's what our culture is. That's what we were trying to do, is we want to keep it open. We want to move the industry forward. So when you look at the timing of certain things, when you look at the efficiency of certain things, you can start putting pieces together and kind of for yourself come to a conclusion as to the influence that certain things we've done, how they've had on the industry, whether their names continue to live on as we've known them in the past, or they live on under different names or references. The fact is that as we push the technologies forward, as we push the industry forward, it's working and everybody's benefiting from it. What I would caution people against is, again, proprietary technologies and initiatives. They're intended to lock you in instead of necessarily move the industry forward. They come in as under the disguise of being great for the industry and all these great types of things, but really what they're great for is entirely just the company putting out the proprietary technology. So we have a different philosophy. It's why I'm here. It's why I love being here, and it's why I'm so motivated to continue doing what we're doing, because it's a greater purpose. I think it's something where I think, by and large, we want to leave the industry better to 20 years from now than where it is today. Much like I think a lot of us have left. When you look at the industry 20 years ago, as I was talking about earlier, we're so much better today than we were in the past. And a lot of that came from the sharing of information, the sharing of technology, the advancement of the entire industry, and that's ultimately, I think, the best way for us moving forward.
Just slightly off topic, I remember back in the day I used to own like a Voodoo 2 and Voodoo 3, and it was it was great as someone who owned a Voodoo card, but it could have very easily turned out that I bought the turnips, and then you end up with it was the ATI card, or it was Power VR or whatever that was the that had the API, because obviously it was Glide and everyone supported Glide. And now obviously Microsoft, all of these other kind of vendors are pushing their APIs out, and it's very interesting to me how the industry has changed And I think, even Microsoft themselves, you can see that there's a massive kind of change in their corporate structure and the way that they're handling kind of the push towards kind of getting people just onto that ecosystem and supporting this stuff and pushing, developers and kind of empowering developers. I think, yeah, it's like you said, I think that is, to me anyway, as someone who just kind of watches from the sidelines and pokes occasionally, I think it's really important because ultimately, if you buy a card and then that feature just is never used, what's the point?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I remember you mentioned Glide. We
I
at
know he feels
Alienware,
like 50 years old suddenly, and he's just like,
no, but
oh,
we
okay.
we at Alienware, you probably won't even be able to find this because the internet barely existed back then, at least in terms of how it was used. But we wanted there was the age-old battle of, are you going to get a DirectX card, video card, or are you going to get a 3DFX that supports Glide, right? And then the games had to like support both APIs. Remember this? Everything I'm talking about?
Yes,
And
yes,
then
PTSD again.
so we invented the most rough thing, but it worked, where we created a way to be able to put in, I think it was an ATI card and a 3DFX card, so you'd be able to get DirectX and Glide and be able to play all
Oh, I
games out there
remember
instead
this.
of just
I
being
think I
boxed out of
remember
certain
this.
games. And we had, because the 3DFX went into, I'm trying to remember exactly how we did this. Went into the PCI slot, and then the ATI card went into the AGP slot, if I remember correctly. And then we had a box. We had a switch box that you would basically switch the output of the graphics card, I think it was, to the display. So you
Oh,
could,
wow.
depending on what game you were playing, a DirectX game or a Glide game, or was it OpenGL? I can't remember. But you would switch the box, and then you would be able to use both graphics cards however you wanted to, depending on the game you were playing. There's
That's so
something.
cool.
Was it OpenGL that was the issue? Did you get to choose OpenGL or Glide, or was it DirectX or Glide?
I think 3DFX cards sucked. They were not the best with Direct 3D, but I think
Yeah.
OpenGL was a problem as well.
It was something like that, but we figured out a way to build a solution that could support all the APIs in their best performance with this external switching box.
That's so
We don't want to
cool.
go back to that.
No, 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 that's not. That was horrible. There was like I remember when you had to like deal with like config.sys and
Yes.
autoexe. Oh my god. I remember my friend, this is like way back in the day, like Command and Conquer 1 that was like I think just being released or something like that.
That was
And he
DOS.
was
That was the DOS game.
yeah, and he was trying to figure out like I need more memory, and he was like getting to the point of okay, I've installed the game. Do I need the CD-ROM drivers anymore? Like anything to save that little bit of, like that little bit of memory. But let's move on before we basically start becoming a retro gaming channel. So I guess the last question is fidelity, super resolution, obviously upsampling tech. I know you can't give an exact date, but can you kind of give an update as to how that's going? Will it be this year? And kind of like, I know you can't give percentages, but kind of like what you're hoping to achieve with that. Is it still going to be an open type of philosophy, much like, I guess Radeon, like much like your other technology? Can you confirm anything on that at all?
No. Um, but what I can confirm for you is by and large, every technology that we're looking at, we ask ourselves, how do we make it open based? How do we make it as inclusive as possible? How do we help get the most broad support for it? If you look at what we've done with FidelityFX, the current feature set, right, that we have out there on GPUOpen, you find that it's out there on GPUOpen, and there's been a pretty good adoption of a lot of the features that are on there, and they make games look better. And they don't only have to work on AMD RDNA 1 or RDNA 2 architecture. So, like, I can't tell you, FSR, if it's going to be able to do that or not. I can only tell you that it continues to be religion for us to try as much as we possibly can to keep things open based and as broadly supported as possible. Um, what I can tell you about FSR is that we are making progress. We're making very rapid progress. And I think we've said in the past that it's coming this year. I
Yeah.
can reconfirm that for you. It's coming this year. Um, it, it's I mean, I don't want to set expectations. It's
I'm hearing it's really good. Obviously, you can't confirm that, but I'm hearing the quality
but what's
is
really
really
good? I mean,
good.
really good is subjective, right? I mean,
Let's put it this way:
whoever.
I'm hearing I'm hearing it's very impressive. That's all. I don't want to say anything official. Kind of any leaks really here because I don't think that's fair to you and put you in that position. But I'm personally hearing it's really good, and I'm hearing as well it's cross-platform. But again, I know you can't confirm that.
Correct. I cannot confirm it. Really good is subjective, so I can't even confirm if it's really good or not. And I don't want to set any
There's going to be that
expectations.
one person that's going to be like zooming in 600%. Like, wait a minute, I see a blade of grass here. What's going on?
Well, exactly. Well, here's the thing. Here's the thing I'll tell people. Okay. The the value propositions between our super resolution and the other solutions that are out there, um, they're likely going to be different. They're not going to necessarily be exactly the same, and that's by design. And we think that our value proposition is going to be unique, and it's going to be compelling, and it's going to be an option for folks, and it should be different. Things shouldn't be exactly the same. So we're focused on trying to build something that is in line with our priorities and that we think our customers are going to value the most. This all sounds like general fodder, but when you see the details, you'll kind of be able to put the pieces together and say, okay, I understand what he was referring to now. And then the other thing, whether you're using, and that's like what you said, Paul, like, as I use some of these solutions, and I go back to the reviews of them. I'm like, I keep looking at these still images of games, and I'm like, I never have a still image of a game. Like, why are we doing these comparisons of these two still images? And oh my goodness, look at this dot over here, and look at that dot over there. And I'm just like, but I don't play games that way. Nobody plays games that way. Like, we should be looking at the quality in motion and
Yeah.
the performance uplift in motion and how you actually use these things. It's like it's almost going back to the whole synthetic benchmark versus real gaming benchmark kind of argument. So what I would tell you is that's not to say that our quality is not going to be better or it's going to be worse. I'm not trying to imply that at all. I just find it hilarious because we keep looking at reviews and things out there, and it's like this is not representative of reality. And I
Well,
think we
yeah,
have to figure out as an industry, like, how are we going to solve for that so people can really understand
I,
in practice and in true use how this is going to look and perform and do all those kind of things. I think that's a problem for all of us that we got to figure out.
I think because I've been messing because one of the things that one of the reasons that I want this kind of next week as anyway, I was kind of aiming for next week with this upload anyway, is because I'm finishing the last bits of Radeon Boost. Um, and obviously the thing about Radeon Boost is if you're just standing there, there is no difference in performance, right? So if you're just
Exactly.
looking like if I'm just looking like this, okay, if you're just standing straight forward, you're walking.
And that's the
There's no
challenge we have is like, I want to be able to come out and say Radeon Boost gives you a 60% performance uplift, but I can't do a benchmark.
Yeah, I've actually figured out how.
Okay.
That's one of the reasons that I've been basically screaming because I've been like, how the hell do I test this?
Right.
So what I basically did is after like smashing my face repeatedly on the table trying to figure out how to benchmark it, I basically ran in straight lines on specific games because obviously it's on like Cyberpunk and whatever else. And you quickly establish, well, there's no difference, or just looking straight ahead, obviously no difference. And then what I did is that I had Radeon Boost off, so I started to turn the mouse at a specific speed toward. I can't remember exactly the test, but basically let's just say I was turning it to the right or running an obstacle course, let's say, and then I would enable it again, and then I would do the same, and you can see basically there's a difference in overall frame rate. I can't remember which game it was. I think it was Cyberpunk, but I don't have the results in front of me. But there was like a 10 FPS boost overall just doing this. And
Okay.
again, that doesn't sound much, to say it's 10, but if you're trying to aim and your frame rate is suddenly more stable, it's a big
Right.
difference. When there's a monster on Resident Evil that's trying to chew your face, and you're like running at an RX 480 because I tested it on a 6800 XT, and another reason I want to delay it, and the reason that the 480 is in right now is I want to test Radeon boost on that as well. But if you're running a game like, let's say, Resident Evil 3, and you're being chased by Nemesis, you're probably going to appreciate those few extra frames.
Yeah.
And if I'm looking at an Adobe Premiere after I've recorded this with screen capture software, because I've got like a separate rig that I'm using for capture, you can tell the difference. Like, I'm not going to BS. You can see, okay, there's a few, pixels look a bit blurry here at like 50% quality or whatever. But again, if you won't be able to tell that if Nemesis is about to shoot you with a rocket launcher, and B, I would rather have that additional like
And it's free. It's a free
stability.
performance upgrade.
Exactly. And obviously, if you're running, say, a 6800 XT and you're getting 100 frames a second, okay, you don't need it. But it's to me, it's not about that. It's giving the person the option. That's kind of like my whole thing anyway. It's like it's always about giving gamers an option, right? It's
Hmm.
not you need it or you don't need it. It's an option. Turn it on or off, whatever.
Exactly.
Unlike motion
Exactly.
blur, which should always be off.
Exactly. But it's like that feature, like anti-lag, Radeon Boost, which we introduced a couple of years ago, and have a huge library of games that are supporting the technologies. Smart access, like all these things are. If you turn all of them on in the right combination, I mean, it's hundreds of dollars of value that you're getting in performance out of these technologies being enabled. I just wish more people knew and turned it on and used them, because they're just leaving so much performance and so much value on the table when they don't utilize them, that it just blows my mind. But look, when FSR is coming out, and we're ready to talk about it, we should think through how do we help people really understand the value of it, as they're going to use it every single day, and really somehow figure out how we're going to communicate that, because it's like this boost feature, the anti-lag. We're doing things to games now that are more sophisticated than just throwing frames or
Mm.
throwing compute at the problem, and it changed. The experience is benefiting from it, but how we measure the experience, it's like we're trying to catch up to that as an industry. I think there's a real opportunity for more folks to kind of stay ahead of that with us as we're evolving, to help people understand better objectively, like, how is the experience going to actually improving from this. It's like frames per second is like our default almost on everything, but it's not like anti-lag. It's not really an FPS experience benefit. You can't really measure it with FPS. So it's like we're getting into an interesting evolution of graphics and performance and experience measurements.
Yeah, it's becoming like where you have to obviously do something like FCAT, where it's like you have to figure out time to photon, almost like you press a button, how long does an action take on screen? And the problem, of course, when you're trying to do any of this as well, is you're going to get that guy who's got like a 60 hertz screen that's got like 5 minutes of lag between them. So it's so you always have that one person who's happy to play at 4K 30, or that person who's like, no, I don't care if I'm running the minimum settings. Everything is so, how do I say, it's so personalized. If you've
Yeah.
got like a Counter Strike Source player, for example, all they care, they want 500 frames a second. Because obviously, it's not just about how many FPS you can throw up on screen, as in, let's say you've got 140 hertz, 144 hertz screen, but you also get faster information too, the more responsive the controls and all of that. And again, I'm not like a pro player or anything, but it's very interesting to me. And I think one of the really good things that both yourselves and Nvidia have done, for people who don't really understand games as well, is a lot of changes to the control panel where you can just auto optimize the game and kind of set it up. And I think that, I was speaking actually to Neil Trevitt, who obviously works at Kronos Group a little bit, and a couple of others. And, we were all kind of talking about how games on PC now, I think one of the reasons we're seeing this explosion is because you don't have to mess around with, massive amounts of config files, right? It's like most games will kind of set the settings for you. You know, not
Right.
all, but a good number of them.
Yeah,
And
there's
if
like a
not,
good experience auto calibration that occurs. Yeah.
exactly. And if not, you can have Radeon software or GeForce or whatever kind of figure this out for you. And I think, you know, as we move forward in the industry, we're in this really bizarre time. I've said this many times on the channel. We're in this really weird time where we've got, you know, next, you know, generation APIs. We've got next generation hardware. You know, an RDNA free. Lovelace, all of these architectures are going to be ridiculous. But even just ignoring those architectures and looking at what we've got now, like, you know, direct storage, and you know, your mind starts like ticking over. At least someone like me, it's like, okay, well, SAM allows you to transfer huge quantities of data rather than 512 megabytes contiguous chunks. What's that going to look like in terms of direct storage, and you know what's going to happen in the industry? I think it's just what I'm trying to say is, because I'm kind of rambling, but I just think that we're in this really strange position right now, and I think there's going to be a lot of stuff which is very. I don't envy guys like yourself or even Joe, who's listening into the conversation, probably probably grimacing on some of the stuff we're talking about, because I think it's going to be very difficult to communicate to people. And you know, you look at bar charts and they're so easy to look at, but it's not as easy to discuss kind of specific features, at least in my opinion. And I know Nvidia, you know, I won't, you know, I don't want to say too much, but even Nvidia, I know they've had a lot of trouble just trying to kind of get people to understand what DLSS is and, you know, the journey there. So I think it's going to be very challenging for a lot of folks.
It's a really interesting market because there's so much innovation going on right now because there's again competition now that we're really competitive in the space, that everyone is like really like on alert, one upping each other and innovating, and you know, need drives invention, and there's a real need now to innovate. And you're right, it's more and more challenging, and here's why it's a burden and it's an opportunity, not just for me and for companies like AMD. It's for everybody who's passionate about gaming and the enthusiast industry. When we started off Alienware, we're a little niche thing, like a hobby, you know, almost a hobbyist thing. And nobody cared about the gaming industry back then. Not nobody, sorry, but very few companies cared about the gaming industry back then. There weren't chassis that were made for enthusiasts and gamers. There wasn't overclocking being supported by any of the big companies out there, Intel or AMD or 3DFX or NVIDIA at the time. There weren't, you know, fans being custom made and thermal modules being made for our industry. Nothing was being made for the gaming industry, the gaming hardware industry, because there was no gaming hardware industry. And companies design products for a market that is either already established or they're trying to create because they see opportunity for the market. Now, fast forward 20 years, and you have this monstrous industry where you can choose from liquid cooled CPU coolers. There's, you know, a ton of different options out there. There wasn't liquid cooled CPU coolers when we started. We launched the world's first desktop computer with liquid cooling as an OEM. There were DIYers that were doing it, but we had the first liquid cooled desktops. Think about that, right? And we were using like a fish tank system and a fish pump, and it was ludicrous. And they would leak in the factory floor. You had to refill it every 6 months because it would evaporate. As an industry, we have to understand that we're growing rapidly, and the people that are attracted to our industry now that are coming in, they're not necessarily, they don't have the history you and I have, Paul. They don't have the 20, 30 years. They didn't go through those, the good old days, you know, right? So
Oh, no, you feel it.
so
It's
the burden
like
is on
Half-Life
us.
1, right? You just like
Exactly.
remember the early days, like Glide, 3DFX, like Half-Life 1. You're like, I feel old and ancient, and sometimes like, oh God.
That burden, right? Like we have a burden today to be able to explain things to our new audience, our ever growing audience, in a way that resonates with them and that they're going to be able to understand and that they're going to be able to thrive in. And we have the responsibility to build those products for them as well, because the worst thing that can happen is that this industry shrinks. All of us will suffer if that happens, right? So the burden and the opportunity is on all of us to ensure that that never happens. And that means we have to keep evolving with how we communicate to our customers and the features that we offer them and the value of them. And the things we may be developing today, may not necessarily be things that would have been valuable 10 or 20 years ago. So not every feature that we build today or every product we build today is something that was hardcore gaming enthusiast drive frames per second based necessarily. And we can't necessarily go in and talk about all these technical terms every single time, because today a lot more gamers are less technical than they were 10, 20 years ago. A lot. I remember I met with an esports team a long time ago, probably, I don't know, maybe 8, 9 years ago. And we went in to interview the esports guys, the athletes. And I went in thinking, oh, you're a hardcore gamer. You must know about hardware as better than I do, right? And I was shocked at how little they knew about the raw technology that was powering their game. They had very simple requirements. There was like, I just need the game to run at this frames per second, at this resolution. I use this keyboard, I use this mouse because I've always used this keyboard and this mouse, and this is what I love. And it was like, these are the things that I care about. They didn't really care about megahertz and gigahertz and process, and they didn't care about APIs. They didn't care about a bunch of different things. And I was kind of like surprised. They didn't know about the differences in DDR technologies and the latency, cast latency, and the speed of the DDR memory. They didn't know about overclocking, or they didn't care about overclocking. They were focused on, this is the experience I need to win. And as long as the hardware delivers that experience, we're golden. And that was a moment where I realized this is a different type of audience. This is because they grew up in a more simplified market. They came into it. They didn't necessarily have to know all the things that we knew in order to get a game to run. And that's a good thing. That's mission accomplished. But we also have to understand that the way we used to talk to each other, or we talk to each other, has to evolve as to how we talk to this new demographic moving forward, or otherwise we could lose them.
I think I've eaten up enough of your time.
Thank you for the opportunity, Paul. I'm
No, it's
sorry
been a
it's
hell of
so
a lot of fun.
overdue, but I'm glad we were able to finally do it.
No, it's been a hell of a lot of fun.
I appreciate you making the time for us. I appreciate the questions. They weren't easy. They weren't softball, but they were very fair. And I hope I was able to answer them to your satisfaction.